So welcome to the satsang. So the invitation in satsang is to rest as being. Resting as being make sure that you mute your mic so we don't pick up any interfering sound, and you can turn it on when you want to speak. So as I was saying, in satsang, the invitation is to rest as being. Resting as being is a sort of a letting go, relaxing your belief structures, relaxing your feeling structure, and resting in God's grace. God's grace is ever present, ever available for us to rest as that. So you let go of your past, of your stories, of your ideas about yourself, your interest in improving yourself, your regrets, your sorrows, your hopes. And for a moment, this very moment, you simply bathe into your true self, into being awareness, pure being, effortless beingness. Your true nature is this transparency, this restful beingness that is the reality, the truth of what we are. We are not what we think we are. We are not what we hope we are. We are not what images others may have or we imagine others to have about ourselves. We are none of that. Anything that appears is not what you are. You are the infinite, invisible self. That is God's gift, God's reality, God's truth. You do not need to do any effort to be what you are. We make an effort to be something that we are not, to be a better person, to be a more loving person, to be a more lovable person. All this requires effort, strain, and in the end, it does not satisfy. It does not reveal the happiness that we are. What we are is already perfect and complete. And everything that unfolds in your life is just as it should be. Everything that unfolds in your life has one purpose. And the purpose is to reveal to yourself what you are. Reveal yourself to yourself. To reveal to yourself that you are nothing that is perceived, nothing that exists in time and space. As long as you perceive yourself as a man or a woman, as a phenomenal event in time and space, you will experience a sense of separation, a sense of incompleteness. You will experience an unhappiness which is an add-on, an unhappy add-on, an unnecessary add-on to the peace and the bliss that we are. So this journey, this manifestation, is about the realization of our pristine, our innate, pure, diamond-like true nature. There is a download that we have inherited and accepted. The download to be a separate self, to be a person, and all our suffering, our regrets, our sorrow, and the deeds that create pain and suffering are a result of this download. When we separate ourselves from the totality, we suffer and we cause suffering. But when we contemplate our reality, which is the reality of consciousness, of awareness, of beingness, of the absolute, we realize that there are no borders, that there isn't a separate me and a separate you. It's just the purity and the infinity and the invisibility and the formlessness of consciousness. This recognition is a crucial recognition. It's a recognition of the source, of the true I am, before becoming somebody, before becoming a body-mind. In fact, you never become a body-mind, because body-mind are appearances that appear to you without you becoming anything that appears to you. When you contemplate what appears to you, you find thoughts, perceptions, and sensations. But when you go to a thought, or when you go to a perception, you don't find anything outside of your very self. It's always yourself that you find, yourself as consciousness. You don't actually find an object, a separate object from consciousness, or a separate thought, or a separate experience, or a separate perception outside of consciousness. But like when you contemplate a cloud that has the shape of a lion, you go to that lion, but you only find the space. You don't actually find an object outside of the very awareness, consciousness that you are. The whole premise of separation is that there are separate realities. There is a tree out there that exists separate from me. But when you look at the tree out there, you're only observing, you're only perceiving your very perception. And your perception is not out there. It's nowhere and everywhere, but it's not out there. It's intimate with the knowingness of it. The known and the knowingness of the known are intimate, because the known cannot exist without the knowingness. There is an intimacy of the known with the knowingness. And the reality of the known is not separate from the knowingness. This knowingness is what we refer to as I. I perceive, I am. But the I, when you look for the I, you don't find any object. You find invisible knowingness, an awake, aware light of being. These are sort of terms to speak of it. You find the formless reality of being. You find the transparency, the borderless presence. So resting in and as being is resting in and as the reality of the self. Resting in and as God's grace. There is one reality. And that reality is infinite, eternal, invisible, and yet everything that is visible is it. So, welcome to Satsang, and I invite your questions. You can pose your questions by speaking them or by writing them in the chat box. In the meantime, I have a question that I forgot to go over it last time. Zoe had sent this question, so I will take this opportunity to look at the question now. So Zoe writes, "Hi Magdi, could you speak about suicide? One of the teachers I work with just lost her teenage son today. He apparently committed suicide. I am wondering about if this too is not personal. It is just an appearance, God manifesting in another form, like the example you gave about Pompeii erupting, and how this too can open our hearts to truth." You cannot kill that cannot be killed. You cannot destroy the indestructible. What you can kill is already killable. And in a way, it's already dead. Sometimes situations arises where the pain is unbearable, or certain crisis that we cannot deal with. And we decide, okay, I will kill this body and be done with that. But killing the body does not lead to the end of the wheel of samsara, the end of the spinning of the wheel of samsara. Only the full awakening and establishment, the recognition of your infinite reality, your universal and infinite reality, only the establishment of that reality in your own experience brings a complete end to the wheel of samsara and to karma. So, killing a body, which are happening every day, millions of bodies are being killed, whether they're being killed via suicide or via car accidents or via other causes, they are being killed. But this does not bring the revelation of the self. Because if it did, then we would all commit suicide, and that's that. But the wheel of samsara keeps spinning. And this entire journey is not about having a better life or a better experience, but about awakening to the self. So in a way, there is no real significance to suicide. Outside of missing out on the opportunity to do the best with this experience, what we refer to as the human experience, to contemplate. And sometimes the contemplation occurs in the midst of a very hot fire, a very difficult situation, or after a very difficult situation. So with suicide, we're just delaying, we're postponing the opportunity to take full advantage of this experiment, which is the human experiment. But we also waste this opportunity in many other ways besides suicide, by pursuing money, wealth, experiences, feelings. If you look around you or you look at yourself, you will find that there is a lot of that we do. We turn our attention to the world, body, mind, and we addict to various activities we pursue, forms, which is a form of slow suicide, because the body is dying every minute and we're not taking advantage of this opportunity to contemplate the self. Instead, we're still mesmerized by the world, body, mind. But that is eternal, what is true, what is real, cannot be killed, cannot be wounded, cannot be hurt. And what is it that dies? Every moment in our experience, a thought arises and dissolves. The birth and death of a thought. Every moment in our experience, a certain bodily sensation arises and dissolves. Birth and death is just movement. It is mind. The reality of mind, the reality of movement, the reality of body is not with the body, is not with the mind impression. The reality of the body, the reality of the mind is invisible, infinite, true. Reality is absolute. But we kill the body, we do suicide because we believe there is a reality called the body. We think we are killing something real. But God every second is killing bodies and birthing bodies and killing thoughts and birthing thoughts, killing sensations and birthing sensations without lifting a finger. She's the Almighty, omniscient self. Does not give a hoot about forms arising and dissolving. If you look at it, tsunami arises and 100,000 people are wiped out in 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Simultaneously, 100,000 people are being born, 100,000 bodies are being born. Like your dreams, like in your dreams, in your night dreams. Thousands of bodies are being born, and thousands are dying in your dreams. You need to realize the eternity of consciousness, the reality, the universality, the infinity, the majesty, the transparency of being. There are no limitations. God is infinite freedom. And whatever we experience, there is room for it to be experienced, otherwise, it would not be arising. Whatever we experience is meant for us to be experienced. But the problem is that we resist experiencing. Instead, we think about things. We try to manipulate God's will. We're playing dominoes with God's grace. Whatever arises for us is meant for us. But it's not meant for us to argue with it, to like it or dislike it. It is meant for us to completely die in it. But do we do that? If you observe carefully how you live, we often are arguing with what's arising. We want it to be different. Whenever there is suffering that arises in your life, it invites you to ponder what is the cause of that suffering, what is the root cause of the suffering. And you are very fortunate in that there is an understanding already in your space that the root source of suffering is separation, and that the separation is a belief and feeling structure. There is no reality to separation. And that suffering is this imagined separation from the source, that I am a body-mind, I am a personal consciousness. When you examine the personal consciousness, you don't find a person. You find consciousness, awareness, beingness, knowingness, the light of being. But you don't find a person. You may find a thought of a person, an idea or an image of a person. But an image is not a person, it's just an image. It dissolves. A thought is not a person, it's just a thought, like among a million other thoughts that arises and dissolves. But yet we stubbornly believe that we are a man or a woman, that we are born. But our experience does not say that. Our experience is that of presence, of pure presence, like right now, this very moment. Our experience is this formless beingness, this aware presence. There is nothing right here, right now, where this is starting here and ending there. There is nothing that is a born person or a dead person or a dying person outside of a thought. So I went, I'm not sure where I went with your questions away, but yes, nothing is personal, Zoe. Nothing is personal, not because that's how we want it, but nothing is personal because there is no person. Believing that something is personal is just thought and sensation, thoughts and feelings. Reality is one, indivisible wholeness. The entire field of personhood is the field of separation. Suicide is just an expression of the belief in the personal power. That's a chimeric, it's myth. There is no personal power. There's only one power, which is God's power, Almighty Being. So if you have any questions.
Hi, Mandy.
Hello, John.
You just sounds like I'm echoing here.
My end, you are good.
I'm okay. Good. Uh, you mentioned the field of personhood, and I'm. Could you elaborate on that? I mean, does that include? It's just everything. Thought, feeling, sensations. Um, just if you could elaborate on those, that would be great.
Yeah. Field of personhood, or the impression of separation, refers to an external world, an internal self. That there is a sort of a virus in the space that the human race is infected with this virus, which is the impression of personhood, that there are personal consciousness, there are separate consciousnesses, there are external forms, and the unified field is overlooked because of the impression of personal power and a personal reality that somehow overlooks or lost its connection with the unified field of being, the indivisible self. And as a result of that virus, the human experience is available, the human experience is born, arises for the revelation and the reconnection with the unified field. So this human experience is that opportunity. It's not a punishment, but it's the purgatory, if you want to use that term from the Christian terminology. It's a purgatory where you have an opportunity to reconnect with the grace of God, to reconnect with the wholeness, to reconnect with the field, to recognize yourself as that, what you truly are. And so the human experience continues, and it has the field of personhood. It is the field of personhood, the impression of personhood, the impression of separation, the impression of separate selfhood. That person is the impression of this impression is what maintains the human experience. And once this impression is contemplated, is looked at, is inquired into, and dissolves in your inquiry, then the human experience dissolves, rests, returns to the source. No longer the impression of personhood is no longer prevalent in the field. It dissolves out of the field, out of the personhood, the field of personhood, and returns to its unified state, to its wholeness, to its source. And so in the waking field, in the human field, everything that arises for you is the teaching, is a teaching, is a pointer for your contemplation of the reality. And if you live in contemplation of what the reality of what appears, because what appears calls your attention to its reality. First, it mesmerizes you, but then at some point, it returns you to the source to the reality of what appears, to its source, to its reality. Everything that appears in your life has that hidden message in it. It has God's hand in it. And also there are God's messengers. God's messengers take on a human form to speak to you as a friend. But everything that is speaking is the self. And when I say speaking, I'm not just talking about this sort of speaking that is being spoken now, but everything is speaking. The clouds, the sky, the birds, the rain, the hardships, the neighbor. Did I address your question, John?
Yeah, that gave me more information about where you're coming from, and I guess the other, uh, I have difficulty following it. I get the idea, or I know from our satsangs and my own experiences of being able to witness, uh, thoughts and so-called personhood in some sense, and um, however, when you speak about um purgatory and God is doing this in some way and that and all that, I have more difficulty following that because I don't know that to be a direct experience. So I just have more difficulty following that.
Just, it's okay. Just be comfortable with whatever you're comfortable with, and if you have questions about the terms that I'm using, just ask them. So when I spoke about purgatory, just using the term from the Christian terminology, but we can scratch that. The point that I'm making is that this wakeful dream, this waking dream, this human experience that you are having is a laboratory of sort. Is not the end game. It
Yeah.
is it is your an opportunity. It is submitted, presented to you for your contemplation of truth. You have no choice about it because in this human experience you have unhappiness, you have internal conflict, you have the emotions, and though all of those you can't rest with them. They nag you. You want to come to
Mm.
peace. You want to come to the awakening. You want to come to the freedom. You want that roller coaster ride to end. It's true that in many cases human beings are numb to the roller coaster. They're riding the roller coaster and they riding and hoping that it's gonna get them somewhere, or that's the meaning of this life is just to ride the roller coaster. But for some that have ridden the roller coaster long enough, they they have within them this calling to realize that does not go up and down, that does not keep flopping between happiness and happiness, happiness and unhappiness. And although contemplation is available across the board, we are at different stages in our contemplation. In some cases, our contemplation is leading us to pursue, relationships, pursue money, pursue power, because we believe that that's the path, that's the way to become known or to become famous or whatever. At some other stage, you're done with all that, and you realize that your contemplation now is to realize what is this angst, what is the source of this angst. So the term purgatory refers to this field that is available to inquire, to sort of you're neither completely in the abyss, in the darkness, nor are you in God's light, but you are experiencing both. You're experiencing the misery and the unhappiness of separation. At the same time, you know within yourself the happiness and the freedom of I like the term God, of being.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're in between, and you have opportunities to investigate, to inquire, to conduct your own experiments, to experiment with different way of living, or different way of responding, or different way of being with situations. So it's this form of laboratory for me. And certain things start to resonate for you, certain pointers, certain practices, certain ways of living start to resonate for you.
Mm.
They may. And so you experiment with that. Anyways, so in the teaching, there isn't any one message. The teaching is very broad, and it's not possible to understand everything that is being shared. But in time, the different pieces of the puzzle start to come together. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you, Magdi.
Okay, sorry. Hello, Chris. Chris, you write, hi, Magdi. How do you go about reorienting the thinking from I want, I don't want, to everything arises in me? There is a recognition, Chris, a recognition, the thinking that arises I want and I don't want has power in it, in that it grabs your feelings. You feel like I really don't want this. You feel like, oh, I really want this. So at the feeling state, that's where it gets really sticky. So you can contemplate, where is the thought arising? Because a thought is an arising. I like this, or I don't like that. It's an arising. So you can contemplate, where is this thought arising? And to what is this thought arising? Out of what? Out of what? And to what is this thought arising? Now, for you to be able to contemplate that question, there has to be some space for you that's available to you to ponder that question. If that space isn't there, well, you cannot ponder that question. To what is, and out of what is this thought arising? And usually when we are very identified with our me structure, like I want this, and this is what will make me happy, or I don't want that, this is really bad for me. When we have strong identification, we have strong feelings. And when, in that case, there is very little room to contemplate. And so the contemplation that everything arises in me is not possible when the identification is very strong. So the suffering will increase, because you want something, that means you're really desiring it, and therefore you're suffering because you don't have it. Or you don't want something, you're contracting about something that's coming at you, and so you're suffering as a result of the contraction. In both cases, wanting something and not wanting something, resisting something, is a contraction, is unhappiness. It's what we refer to as suffering. And so the suffering will increase. And at some point in the suffering, as the suffering increases, there will be a point where it becomes like sort of unbearable. And when it's unbearable, you are sort of closer to the surrendering. And when you're surrendering, there is a space of surrendering. And the space of surrendering is a space that is also available for the contemplation of what is going on. What is this that's arising? Now, there is it's not black and white. Like, yes, there is a space, or no, there isn't a space. There's also variations. There is also a shade of how much space there is for contemplation. In other words, identification are degrees of identification. It's not like totally identified versus unidentified. There's a whole gradient. But if you look at your question right now, let's say that there is a thought that I really want to get that promotion, or I really don't want my partner or my parents to talk to me this way or to treat me this way. Really don't want. The fact that the thought arises is not going to change anything. Your parents, for example, are who they are, and they already have their ideas and their beliefs. So you're not wanting, or you're wanting them to be different, isn't really going to make such a big difference. That's an understanding. In other words, you may come to the understanding that wanting or not wanting something may not really mean anything, may not lead to anything. So how about relaxing about it? That this sort of understanding may help you to relax a little bit about your desires or your resistances, because in most cases they don't get fulfilled. There's just a spin without any results. But in terms of everything arising in you, it depends what you mean by me. Because if I am this body, then the rain or the weather is not arising in me, it's arising outside of me. But if I am consciousness, then the weather is arising in consciousness, in the knowingness that knows it. So if I'm a body, if I'm identified with the body, then the me is this body, and there are certain things happening in me, like the blood flow and the feelings in my leg, or all that is happening in me as the body. And everything else that's happening in the world and is happening outside of me. So to come to the understanding that everything is arising in me, you have to look at what is this me? What do I refer by me? Usually by me, we refer me the body mind. It's just how we define the me. But there is something that knows the body. In other words, it's something that knows thoughts, that knows sensations, bodily sensations. But what knows bodily sensation is not the sensation itself. What knows the body is not the body itself. It is consciousness that knows the body. It is consciousness that knows thoughts and sensations. So the body arises in consciousness. And when you realize that the body arises in consciousness, then everything that the body experiences must also arise in consciousness, because the body is arising in consciousness. It's like you are dreaming that you are a pink flying elephant that is looking at a herd of pink flying elephants. So the pink flying elephant is rising in you, meaning it is you, and the herd of pink flying elephants that the pink flying elephant is perceiving is also rising in you. So the mind, the body mind, arises in you. It is you that perceives thoughts, you meaning I, the self, consciousness that perceives thoughts, perceptions, and sensations. And whatever is downstream from the world body mind, meaning the body mind content, also refers to consciousness. Let's say that in your night dreams, you are dreaming that you are a 10-year-old boy that is going to school with your schoolmates, and you are experiencing your schoolmates, and you're experiencing your teachers, and you're experiencing, the study hall. And now the 10-year-old boy of your dreams refers to you, because you are dreaming this 10-year-old boy. And whatever this 10-year-old boy is perceiving, although the impression is that it is the 10-year-old boy that is perceiving all of his classmates and his teachers and so on, in fact, it is you that is dreaming this 10-year-old boy, and all the perceptions of this 10-year-old boy, they belong to you, because the 10-year-old boy belongs to you. So what is key in your question about that everything arises in me is to have a clear understanding about whether it's me, the body, or I, consciousness. Everything arises to I, as I, in I, consciousness. And me as well arises to I, as I, in I, as consciousness. But by me, I do not refer to an actual separate person. By me, I refer to thoughts, perceptions, and sensations, meaning by mind, mind. This is what we refer to me usually. We refer to me as a cluster of thoughts, images, and ideas and sensations. Because in fact, there is no separate me, there is no separate self. Okay, you're welcome, Chris. So if there are any questions. Hello, Richard. Richard, you're right. Do we have to be aware of what our vasanas are before they can be released? Is even the notion of vasanas an illusion? Yes. everything is illusion, including vasanas. But as long as we are not fully free from the illusion, especially at the feeling level, because vasanas refer to the feeling level. Like I feel indignated by Trump, or I feel like I'm an American, or I feel that I have to save the world, or I feel like I have to be a good person, or I feel like everybody should be good. There are all sorts of vasanas that refer to how I feel. And yes, although it is all illusion, it doesn't matter whether it's illusion or not illusion, as long as it's still operating. If it is operating, then to call it illusion or not illusion means nothing. But if it's not operating, then who cares? You can call it illusion, non-illusion, or we don't even know what we're talking about because it's not operating. So you do not need to be aware of the particular vasana. It will make itself aware to you. In other words, if you have get angry in certain situations, that's maybe your vasana that you get angry about political issues, for example. A certain particular political issue gets you stirred up. It will arise for you in so many times, so in certain frequency, that it will become clear to you that, oh, I have a vasana, that I have issues with, being a Democrat and not being a Republican or something like that. And the in dealing with the vasana, you don't deal with the vasana at the vasana level. What I mean is, if you're identified as a Democrat and you get triggered by what the Republicans do, for example, you do not deal with this vasana by being more understanding of the Republicans or by being less attached to your democratic ideas. You deal with the vasana by, at the feeling level, allowing it to kill you. So you're not trying to wiggle your way. You're not defending your position. You recognize the angst, the unhappiness of that contraction. And you're welcoming it in your entirety, inviting it to do what it needs to do, inviting it to the freedom, inviting it to the release. But you're willing for it to do whatever it wants to do with you. You stay defenseless. And you recognize that all vasanas have to do with a certain identification, and that this identification is fiction and is the misery and unhappiness of the human species. And that by holding on to your identification, you are contributing to the sorrow and maintaining the vasana. And the vasana is this remnant of the me, although you know yourself as consciousness. At the feeling level, the remnants of the me, they are lodged in different parts of the body. And there is an interconnection between the vasanas, because they're all interconnected with this sense of me. And the sense of me can be expressed in different parts of the body. The way you hold your shoulders, the way you move your hands, the way the flow in your hands or your chest, how you hold your neck or your head or your face. There is an interconnection of the subtle and the gross contractions in the body. So there is a relaxation into being where you allow all the sensations to expand in the vastness of your space, in the vastness of being. Your belly, your chest. Which is different from the crouched position. It's a laid back position, expansion, and an allowing and an invitation for all what is arising to arise in its complete freedom. Thus, the vasana is not fed by your resistance, but is welcomed to your freedom. And it's in this welcoming that the fasana releases itself out of your space. Yes, Sir Richard. Any questions? So I will remind you that, which I reminded a couple of times previously, of a retreat that's arising. It's being scheduled in Costa Rica on March 2nd to the 5th. And if you're interested in attending the retreat, you can get in touch. So, namaste, and thank you very much for your lovely company and friendship and love. Thank you. Let me see you.
Namaste.